What's good, YouTube? This your boy Money Mitch TV coming to you straight off the hip. Man, I was just reading the story about George Karl and his recent comments about his book and the stuff he said about Carmelo Anthony. And I just wanted to say this. By me being a Milwaukee Bucks fan, plus at one time a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I just wanted to say this. George Karl is a franchise killer. If you have noticed, all the teams he have coached, he have killed their franchises. But I will say this, besides him killing their franchises, he have pretty much build those teams to great offensive teams, and a lot of times those teams become great playoff teams. But none of his teams never won a championship. So it's kind of crazy how, George Karl talks so much stuff about Carmelo Anthony, J.R. Smith, and Kenyon Martin, calling them AAU babies, saying that Carmelo doesn't dedicate himself on the other side of the ball, which is the defensive side, saying that Kenyon Martin is a big burden to him, and it's just on and on. And also the thing that got me, George Karl also said that Kenyon Martin and Carmelo Anthony are like fatherless kids, where pretty much they making all that money and don't know how to spend it because they don't have a father to teach them how to spend that money. And to me, George Karl has a bad history of tearing down franchises, and I'm gonna go through every franchise that he have coached and the end result of him coaching those franchises, and it's kind of crazy. And pretty much like when he first started coaching, like the coaching gigs that really got him put on when he started coaching Seattle, pretty much when he inherited a team with Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. And if you're thinking about it, that team was like the LA Clippers of the early 90s. And think about it, the same play style that Chris Paul is running, or pretty much the same plays that Chris Paul, Blake Griffin are running. The Seattle Supersonics in the early 90s was the same way as today's Clippers, but a little bit more better on the defensive end. That was the difference between that Sonics team and today's Clippers team. Is, the Sonics teams in the 90s was a little bit better defensively. Maybe a slight edge, maybe just because they played harder. And if you think about it, George Karl inherited that team. That team pretty much became a good playoff team. And he also took that team to the finals against the Chicago Bulls, where they lost in that series. But after that, that team got torn down. Think about it, George Karl was responsible for trading Sean Kemp in that three-way trade where Milwaukee have traded Vin Baker to Seattle and then where Sean Kemp will go to Cleveland, and I think Milwaukee and the Milwaukee Bucks have got Irvin Johnson from that deal, which that was just I don't know. Then turn around, he started having a lot of friction with Gary Payton, and ultimately, Gary Payton left the Seattle Supersonics and went to the Lakers. And after he left Seattle, he went to Milwaukee, which he inherited another team with Ray Allen, Glenn Robinson, and Sam Cassell. And I remember at that time, Sam Cassell just came from the New Jersey Nets, coming to Milwaukee. And think about it, that team wasn't as good. At first they had just Ray Allen and Glenn Robinson, and when they got Sam Cassell, the team started winning. They became a Eastern Conference Finals contender team in the in the Eastern Conference. They became great playoff teams. But at the end, George Karl, killed that relationship with those three players. First thing he did was traded Ray Allen, which was the most horrible trade ever in Milwaukee Bucks history, where he traded Ray Allen for Gary Payton. And if people don't know this, when George Karl forced that trade from Ray Allen to Gary Payton, it was a stupid trade. Think about it. You have a young budding shooting guard that's going to be a future Hall of Famer. But also you traded for Gary Payton, that's also a Hall of Famer, future Hall of Famer at that time too. But Ray Allen was younger, Gary Payton was a little older. And when that trade went down, I remember that day Gary Payton told news reporters that he did not want to stay in Milwaukee. He did not want to go to Milwaukee. He tried his best to get out of that trade. But when that trade was final, he was forced to go to Milwaukee to play with George Karl, because George Karl forced that trade for Ray Allen for Gary Payton, which that was a horrible trade that killed the franchise. Then turn around, gave up Glenn Robinson to the Hawks. Then turn around, Sam Cassell went to the Timberwolves, and that team fell apart. And then he got fired from that team. Then the next team he coached was the Denver Nuggets. He inherited the team with Carmelo Anthony, J.R. Smith, also Nene, Marcus Camby, Kenyon Martin, and that team became a great playoff team. They always got put out in the playoffs, but they was always a great playoff team. And then he pretty much killed that franchise too, having issues with Carmelo, having issues with Kenyon Martin, having issues with J.R. Smith. A lot of those players have gotten either traded away or left and signed with other teams. And I'm not even going to talk about Sacramento, because Sacramento was already dysfunctional before he came there. So Sacramento was an exception. But all those teams he have great success with. But the problem with the end results of those teams he has success with, he killed their franchises, because George Karl is not a people person. He doesn't build relationships with his players. He's pretty much just coach, player. You do what I say, not as I do, or as I say, or whatever that saying is. But it's just kind of crazy how George Karl just killing these franchises. Now, since the Sacramento job, I think it have, really, killed his career. And it's really showing that, George Karl he's a good offensive coach, but he has bad reputations with players around the league, because he's not a people person, because he doesn't build relationships with players, and he always have frictions with players. And I think another reason why George Karl doesn't have friction always have frictions with players, because of the fact that majority of the players he have coached are African American. George Karl grew up middle class, where pretty much George Karl, he don't know what it's like to eat a Spam sandwich. He don't know what it's like to eat fried bologna sandwich with syrup on top. He don't know what it's like to drink sugar water. He don't know what it's like to eat government cheese. He don't know what it's like to go to the grocery store, steal meat for your mother just to feed the family. He don't know what it's like, because majority of the people he have coached were black kids that grew up poor. And and just that, from that background, he doesn't understand what the struggles that African Americans go through. But overall, George Karl is a franchise killer, and he needs to be dealt with in a way that he don't need to be coaching in the NBA no more. Yes, he's a good coach. He know how to turn a franchise around, but at the end, he kills franchises. Think about it. I'm gonna go back to my Milwaukee Bucks. If he haven't traded Ray Allen on that day, the Milwaukee Bucks would have won a championship. And the reason why I'm going to say that is, imagine if he didn't trade Ray Allen that year after the Bucks went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Imagine. He would have kept Ray Allen, kept Sam Cassell, kept Glenn Robinson, draft some more pieces. That team would have been a championship contender team that very next year. But due to the fact of him having friction with Ray Allen, Sam Cassell, and Glenn Robinson, and all three of those players wasn't on the same page with George Karl, he forced trades and forced them out of those teams. So that shows you about George Karl's character. But anyway, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think about George Karl. It's your boy Money Mitch TV, and I'm out.